Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's weekly zikr. Um, on this, it's Mawlid still. People are celebrating Mawlids at the moment because it's Rabi al-Awwal. Tonight in the UK is also a special night within the British calendar. It's called Bonfire Night, which might sound a bit strange, but it's actually to commemorate an event which happened hundreds of years ago, where a guy called, literally he was called Guy Fawkes, tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. And this was, I mean, he was a Catholic, he had various motivations why he tried to do this, but he didn't succeed, and he was caught. So because of it, people celebrate that fact that he was stopped in this terror attack hundreds of years ago. And to this day, people light bonfires, and they shoot fireworks in the sky, have a firework display. So if you hear any banging in the background, that's what it is. It's fireworks going off. I don't know how much of that the phone will pick up. And also people are awaiting the results of yesterday's election in the United States of America, which seems to be close, and it looks like it's going to be quite divisive. But people either support one side or the other, and there seems to be quite a split between the two camps, and it's probably going to be a while before this is resolved because the election is extremely close. And maybe in all of this there is a sign for the times in which we live in. In the UK too, today is also the beginning of lockdown 2. So the United Kingdom has gone back into lockdown again, which means everything except essential shops and services has been shut down, and people have to stay in their homes until this is over, unless they are an essential key worker. As well as all the usual social distancing advice that is still at play. So, yes, today is marking all sorts of things. In regards to the situation in the United States, which I guess is going to be on a lot of people's minds, the election seems to be close, and this is causing people to get quite, or at least certain people to get quite heated. There are protests on the streets of America. Some of them who are protesting because they feel their candidate hasn't done as well as they should have done, or they feel that they're not being heard or listened to, or other disgruntled, reasons about the voting process. It is a terribly sad situation, and it is something to concern anybody who believes that democracy is the right way to run a society. Is it like the longer that this result takes to come out, it's likely that this is going to increase, and if people are not happy with the result, I mean, there's all sorts of allegations of votes not being counted, or votes being counted that are fraudulent votes. It's a terribly sad situation. It reminds me a little bit of what happened here in the UK after the Brexit vote, and also some people wondering if they voted the right way. All sorts of revelations have come out about the candidates, and it is troubling and sad to see in the world's largest democracy. Actually, I don't think it's the world's largest democracy, but it's one of the most powerful democracies. I think Indonesia is actually the largest democracy in the world. But America's not as large as Indonesia in terms of people. But America is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, democratic country in the world. So to see this kind of situation develop, and also there's not just in America, but also in Europe, there seems to be more of a magnification and polarization. So people are magnifying the more extreme elements within these groups, within the two camps. So in America, you've got like Democrats, which are on the left, and Republicans, which are on the right. And the people that are more on the left or more on the right have come to a greater degree of prominence. And of course, when you've got such polarization where more people move either to the left or to the right, then it widens the gap between them. So it makes it more difficult for them to come to an understanding that everybody is happy with. And we could end up with a situation where a lot of people in America, whoever is the winner in the end, I mean, it looks like Biden has the edge at the moment, but whoever ends up winning the American election, it looks like that there will be a very large section of the American population that will not see them as a legitimate president and will not recognize them as the president. Now, that is a very worrying situation in a democratic society. Democracy is a system that was arrived at in order to try to avoid a lot of the problems that came about with power transitions before it was developed. So, for instance, in the United Kingdom, which is you could say the mother of the American political system, spiritually and philosophically, because America initially started out as a British colony. So they initially based a lot of their systems upon what was done in Britain, and then they adapted and from their perspective improved upon it to suit their situation in the United States. So I mean, obviously it's concerning for us when we look on and see this situation in the US. And I'm not going to go too much into the candidates themselves, but the original reason that democracy was developed was to try to avoid bloodshed and violence. It was a way that we could actually resolve our disputes through having a parliament, and in that parliament, representatives of the people could come together and discuss. However passionately they discuss the issues and try to arrive at decisions between them that would satisfy them as being fair decisions, and at least to the point that they wouldn't get more angry about and get into a violent situation. But it's interesting. I mean, people around the world might not know this, and this is why I'm mentioning it, because I know I have a worldwide audience. But within the Houses of Parliament in the United Kingdom, where Boris Johnson, who's our current Prime Minister, stands on the one side, and where Keir Starmer stands on the other side, between those two benches, there is actually a distance that is exactly 2 swords in length. So literally, if they all went into the Parliament with swords, if Keir Starmer got his sword and Boris Johnson got his sword, they couldn't stab each other. And this is a little fact that's often overlooked and people don't realise. I mean, obviously, today Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer are not going to go into the Houses of Parliament with any swords. But when the building was first built, this was something that was a consideration that had to be made. And it shows the tension between the two camps that were elected into Parliament. They were almost enemies. So I suppose, in a way, it's kind of understandable as to why elections can get very tense. It is a way that we have come to as societies to try to have power transitions that are peaceful. And it doesn't mean that we will necessarily always agree, with whoever is elected in power. But at the same time, it is a way that we try to avoid violence and bloodshed and even more serious problems than the problems that result around elections. But it doesn't stop elections from having allegations of fraud or allegations of corruption. And it doesn't stop people from being very tense when the actual political positions of the two different parties differ quite markedly from each other. And this isn't always the case. I mean, if we see in the United Kingdom, there was some convergence in the 1990s between the positions of the Labour and the Conservatives on a lot of issues. Not on everything, but on a lot of issues. They certainly weren't so seriously apart that, you know, people would get, you know, to that point where they get so angry and upset if the other party was elected in. They'd be disappointed, but it wouldn't get to that kind of stage. But what we see in recent years is the left and right in a lot of countries have moved further from each other. And, you know, the left has moved more towards what would be traditional socialism, and the right has moved towards what would be more traditional conservatism, or in republicanism. So we're ending up in a situation where, once again, this is why politics is getting more tense and people are getting so upset about it. And then, of course, you do have situations where people in one party or another hear things about the candidates on the other side, which don't put them in a good light, and, you know, they are seen to be as corrupt. And then that creates a lot of concerns as well, because who wants a leader that is really, really corrupt, you know, or, you know, is being linked to serious issues that, you know, I don't want to go too much into that, but things which can concern people. And there have been concerns raised about both candidates, both in this previous presidential election in the United States, with both Hillary and Trump, and also in this election between Trump and Biden. Both candidates in both elections have had a lot of things raised about them, which has caused concerns to a lot of people. And obviously the people who are even more concerned are people in the opposite party. I'm trying to discuss this in as impartial a way as I can, but just to give people an idea of the tensions and what's going on. I hope that they at least... Yes, people get very anxious during elections. Because they don't know the many things and fears that their life, you know, how their life will be greatly affected in a bad way. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, especially if the person who comes into power, like Trump did last time, he introduced a lot of changes. Now, of course, the people who supported him were very happy with those changes, but then the people who didn't support him were very upset and thrown by it. And on the other hand, of course, Biden is proposing a lot of drastic changes, which you know, to what Trump's been doing, which of course really upsets those people who have thrown their support behind Trump. In the UK, we had a similar situation with this whole Brexit issue, where, you know, the people who supported Brexit were portrayed as little Englanders, were portrayed as not wanting to be part of a global society. Whereas, of course, many of them do, but they just wanted us to be part of a global society as Britain, as the United Kingdom, and not as just another state of what was becoming an ever more integrated European Union that they feared would become like a federal state. And that Britain's influence and identity would be watered down within a greater Europe. So, you know, they had their reasons why they did that. But on the other hand, a lot of people who were supporting Brexit were portraying those people who voted in support of the European Union as being communists, as being equivalent almost like to Soviets, or wanting to build a super state. Some even suggested they were Nazis, which of course Soviets, Nazis and communists are all different things. But these were the allegations that were being thrown around. But of course, a lot of those people who voted, you know, to remain in the European Union is because they felt part of being part of the family of nations of Europe. and they want European countries to be more integrated because they feel our future is for borders to be less pronounced and for people to be working together more closely across borders. Neither side is are as bad as what they're being painted by the other side. It's not that they're all evil because they support a different political view than yourself, whichever side you would support. And it's when people get to that point when they don't just disagree but they paint the opposition as being evil or demonic, this is actually very concerning because it creates even more serious problems. These people are no longer being seen fully as your countrymen, but they are being seen as your enemies. Whereas in politics, really, we should be seeing people on the opposition as being our countrymen, our fellow citizens that have a different point of view, of how we run the country. It's better, but also I do understand why sometimes people don't, because if the opposition is portraying a very radically different perspective, on how things should be done, and this could have quite serious consequences, then obviously it gets people's emotions up and people get upset. But these are all things to be aware of. And I hope nobody who's watching this is seeing the opposite side as demonic and evil or something like this. But if they are, then please try to see things from their perspective. Try to see what their motivations are. Because ultimately, we all live together. We all live together in the same countries. We all live together on the same planet. And we have to find constructive ways forward, which are for everybody, that everybody can get behind, at least to some degree, even if they don't really agree with everything. And this comes about by arriving at a compromise. It might not be exactly what you want, and it's not what the other side wants, but something that you can both agree on. Try to find what the common ground is. This is something that as Muslims the Quran teaches us, to look for what is the common ground. It actually says in a verse to come to a common word between ourselves and the people of the book. This means the Jews and the Christians. So, this going back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad is, an advice that the Prophet Muhammad was instructed by Allah to give to his community, to try to come to an understanding between Jews and Christians, some things that you can agree upon, because they will keep their religions. Some of them might convert to Islam if they're attracted, but a lot of them will keep their religions. A lot of them will keep their way of doing things. But find where you agree with each other and build on that to build a relationship so that you can at least do some things together. Now, this is a principle that we can also apply to the political situation. It's, try to find what you can agree upon. Try to find those principles underneath all of the rhetoric and all of the ideology. What are those principles that you share? What are those principles that you believe in as citizens of your country? And try to find that common ground and work with people to build around that. So that, otherwise, if one group of people wants something that's a radically different vision to another group of people, then how are you going to build anything between that? Because it's so radically different. But if you find something that's closer, if you find where you agree, you can at least build around that, and you can discuss the other things over time and try to come to a better understanding of why each side is supporting what they support. And this is also something else that a lot of Muslims themselves don't realize, is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, whose birthday we are celebrating at the moment, the founder of Islam, the beloved of Allah, he instituted within his community a form of government that was a council or meeting, what was called a shura in Arabic. And actually one of the chapters of the Quran itself is named after this. One of them is called a shura. And you could even translate that as the parliament. Because this is, a parliament and a council. It's only in terms of scale that they vary. A council is usually like what you'd have in a town or city. A parliament is what you have in a country, but in practice they are the same thing. It's just on a different scale of hierarchy. So it's, you could call this the parliament. This idea of having people that are the representatives of their communities come together and discuss the issues of the day, discuss how they are going to handle their country's security, the economy, health issues, and all sorts of their relationship with other communities outside of their remit, other what we now call nations, or unions, how we have a relationship with them and what that relationship will be and what we're going to base that relationship on. All of these things are discussed within a shura or in a parliament. And this is a form of government that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ encouraged. So it's, even though it sometimes doesn't work, sometimes we get into these problems and things get tense, often because of issues of the day and, a lot of change happening. But even then, this is the way forward that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself encouraged, is to have a shura, have a council, have a parliament, and, send your representatives there and then discuss the issues. And no matter sometimes how hard it can be, especially if you're listening to people who are coming from a very different perspective, but you have to listen to what they have to say and hold patience while they listen, and then they have to give you chance to also say what you need to say, and they have to listen. And this is the way it works. I mean, hopefully we can come to this and find a constructive way forward. And it's not just in one country at the moment, because like I says, in the UK at the moment, we're preparing for Brexit, which is due to occur in January next year. Officially we've already left the European Union, but we're still following the same systems and stuff until January, just to try to ease. It's called a transition period, but that transition period ends in January. So it's like we're preparing for Brexit, and hopefully that will be sorted out. Otherwise that could create a lot of problems, and obviously people are worried about that. And in the United States, of course, they've got this election. Meritocracy, well, yes, there is something to be said for meritocracy. But I think you need a balance as well, because, someone says to me, I generally like meritocracy as well. People should be promoted or supported on merit, on what they have to offer. But one, it doesn't always work that way, and it's not always that simple. But also, someone said to me once that if you have meritocracy, then it can encourage elitism, because all the people who are being promoted, they become an elite, and then they look for people similar to themselves, which means that the people that aren't in that clique tend not to get promoted. And I think in a government, you actually need a wider group of people that is represented there. And yes, in certain institutions, in society, especially professional institutions, people have to be promoted on merit. If they are not promoted on merit, then everything would fall apart. But when it comes to government, you also have to hear from those people who have not been promoted, those people who haven't had it so easy. Because if you don't hear from their perspective as well, then nothing will improve within their communities, and things will steadily get worse. And this is why you end up with people supporting in some cases radical versions of socialism and communism, because socialism and communism make promises to these people who have not been promoted, who have not made progress in their lives, and in some cases are often very, very poor, and really almost have nothing. And in a lot of countries, they don't even have hardly any support from the state. So they really impoverished. And this if people are subjected to that throughout their lives, it can make them very, very angry and upset. And I mean, this also comes into the realm of spirituality as well, because, when people are in that condition, then, all that they're thinking about is their immediate needs. It actually sends people into a more animalistic mode of being, because they are not thinking about the bigger issues of the day. They can't. How can you be studying books and studying spirituality and philosophy, and when you have no resources, when you have no resources, but you have no food? In some cases, you might not even have a house. If you do have a house, the house you have is made of tin, and it's got a tin roof, and maybe some wooden beams, and it's maybe tin walls in some cases. In other cases, maybe rough brick walls, but not furnished. Very basic. And the water gets in. The wind gets in. If you're in this situation, all you're thinking about is survival. And then when you see people who have good lives, who are doing well for themselves, and especially people who are super rich and can buy, 10 Ferraris and 100 Mercedes and things like this, those people get very, very angry. And it's easy to understand why they get angry, because they look on and they're like, well, I don't even have a car. I don't even have a proper home to live in. For the price of just one of those Mercedes, then I could live for the rest of my life in that society, and have a nice home and, at least my basics, and be able to send my children to school. This is the situation of a lot of people in other countries. Their homes are shacks that are no better than they're worse actually than what people would consider putting animals in the United Kingdom. So, when people are subjected to those sort of conditions, they are just looking at survival. And then when they, if a group of them get together and they manage to come through that, then, and sometimes it gets too much, they end up getting involved in movements, getting involved in riots, raiding, supplies, because they don't have enough supplies, so they start raiding the supplies from the people who have supplies. They start breaking into their homes and stuff because they're in survival mode. When you're in that situation and the economy's not working for you, the law isn't working for you, the government isn't working for you, and I'm not condoning it. I'm not condoning it at all, because it's still crime. But you got to understand, when people are in that situation and none of these institutions are working for them, none of the pillars of society are working for them, then they will do whatever they can to get by. And that is a very dangerous situation to be in. And firstly, these people should not be in that condition in the first place, because it is part of a civilized society that, people that are really in such a condition should be supported. They should be supported by the government to some degree. They should be supported by third sector in these countries. That's the charity sector, NGOs, to be able to help them to get on with their lives and move forward, and be able to get work or start a business or something so that they can move on with their lives. People shouldn't be subjected to those conditions in the first place. I mean, when people are treated worse than animals, how can anybody expect them to behave better than animals? And this becomes a problem. And we are seeing in a lot of countries around the world that there is a widening gap between the people who have and the people who have not. Even in developed Western countries, about 1% have more than everybody else in their society. How can that be justified? Now, I'm not a communist. I wouldn't support that kind of radical approach, but at the same time, there is a question of justice here. There is a question of justice. How can it be justified that 1% of people can have more than everybody else in their society? Combined, added together. How can it be justified that in the same society there are people who can't even afford to put clothes on their back, eat food properly, or what the food they have is not of a good standard, can't afford to send their children to school, lose their homes, and this sort of situation. This is an issue of justice. It's not even an issue of politics. Whether people are capitalists or communists, they should take a step back and say, well, hang on a minute. It's an issue of justice here. Well, what I mean, I know in your opinion, the 1% is not really a concern. It's like, I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them. But what I'm saying is, if 1% owns more than the rest of their society added together, like literally all of the other people in the society, in sum total, and 1% owns more than all of them, then that means 99% of people own less than that 1%. Now that is an issue of justice, and when people are not even being able to meet their basic needs, I mean, I have no issue with people being rich. I have no issue if people are, have a good, successful business and earn their money in a decent, honest way. And they pay their taxes and give some money to charity and stuff. I really have no issue with people being rich. I'm not jealous of them. I'm happy for them. Good for them that they've made a success of their lives. But at the same time, there is an issue when you have people who cannot even meet their daily needs. When you have people who struggle to feed themselves. When you have people who struggle to house themselves. And we're in a situation now where even in developed countries, there are, it's not a large section of our society, but there is a section of society that are homeless, that they can't feed themselves, even in developed societies. And of course, once you get to developing countries, it's a large part of the society that's like that. That needs to be addressed. And ideally, I would like to see something put in place that helps them in an aspirational way. So, they get help with their basic needs, and also, given some training or education, and given job opportunities so that they can actually work their way out of that situation as well. Because most of them want to do that. They want to work. They want to be successful. This is also true. I mean, if you gave everybody £1 million at the end of the month, you would still have rich and poor people. Yes, Sean, it's true. It's because it's how people manage it. It's not just about people having money, which is also why I believe that an aspirational way is better. Where people get helped initially, that their basic needs are supported, because in the UK we do have a benefit system and people do get some help, but other countries don't have that. So where that is the case, something needs to be put in place to support these people with their basic needs. But also they need to have education. Otherwise you can't get work without education. And they need to be given genuine opportunities after that. If that happens, then a lot of these people will be able to get out of their situations and work their way out of it. And of course, if people work their way out of their situation, and they're supporting themselves, then they start to learn how to budget properly. They start to learn how to manage the money that they have. It's true, if you just give money to people who've never had it, then they might not manage it well. Some might, some won't. But what I'm saying is, it's a tragedy when you've got people who they are homeless. It's a tragedy when you've got people who are living in shacks, and sometimes in countries that are not really poor. I saw this in South Africa. South Africa is not a poor country. South Africa, the rich people in South Africa live like kings. And whether they're rich white people or rich black people, they live like kings. So it's, in a country like South Africa, there should not be people living in, shacks that are worse than what we would put animals in. I just don't, I don't agree with that. I mean, even if like 1% of the national GDP was actually put into a fund that could actually build these people basic homes, then they wouldn't be living in such conditions. And maybe another 1% put into some kind of scheme to help them, generate work within these communities. Something to help them move forward. But well, I'm not a politician. I'm not a politician in South Africa, but maybe it's more complicated than that. But it's distressing. It's distressing when you witness this. It really is. And we are in a situation now where even in developed countries, the gap is widening between the rich and the poor. And there are some people who slip through the system, and it is troubling. That's why Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam put the importance of not letting your neighbor starve to the point of considering them as a non-believer if they did. Yes, Sunny. Socialism should work in hand with capitalism. Well, yes, the certainly the social principles should work in partnership with business principles, and you can't have a society that has no business. I don't see how that's going to function. People have tried that when the societies that become really socialist and everything was organized by the government, and it all collapsed because there was no incentive. But at the same time, there should be something put in place to help those who, they're really struggling. It's a balancing act. It's not a case of, if you just give people handouts and give people handouts, then that's not a good situation either. And where do those handouts come from? If the government gives handouts, then that money comes from taxes. So that means people's taxes will go up. If the money comes from business, then business has to be generating that money in order to be able to give it to projects to be able to do this. If those businesses aren't generating sufficient funds to do that, they will go bankrupt. So it's a basic principle of resources at the end of the day. Now, there are enough resources in the world to support everybody and to support everybody to quite a nice level. But those resources, they're not being managed in the most efficient way that would benefit people. And this is where a lot of problems come from. And it's not just, even some of the environmental problems, going away from the social problems, even some of the environmental problems, they come from mismanaging of resources. There are people who are consuming far, far more than what they really use. If someone is, a very rich person and they own a garage full of cars, most of them they don't drive, or they drive on the odd occasion. And they have used a lot more resources than someone who has, one or two family cars. And those cars have had to be manufactured. And they took resources from the earth, from the ground, from the forests, from, whatever materials go into those particular vehicles. So someone who has a garage full, thousands of vehicles, is using a lot more than someone who is only use one or two family cars. And obviously using a lot more than a family that doesn't have cars, that can't even afford to own cars. So there is a problem of mismanagement of resources here. And this isn't just a political issue, that becomes a spiritual issue as well. Because this kind of crazy consumption is disrupting the world, the environment in which we live. And this affects everyone. It'll even affect those rich people. It will come back on them in due course. Because, if we destroy the very environment in which we live, it will come to a point where it cannot sustain us anymore. There's a balancing thing here. It's not just politics. But our beloved Prophet, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, he did encourage Shura, a council or parliament, as a way to resolve disputes between different parties within society. He was also a businessman. He was a merchant. This is what he did before he went on to do other things later on. And these are points to consider. Our Prophet also taught people to look after their communities, to, before they go on, before they even go on Hajj. Now, Hajj is the fifth pillar of Islam. It's important. But before people are allowed to go on Hajj, they should check everybody within their street. If anybody within their street is hungry or starving or in need of something, they should help them first before they go on Hajj. This is actually more important than the fifth pillar of Islam. How many Muslims follow that these days? I don't know. But it is there. It's in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He was, after all, the Rahmatul lil Alameen. He was the most loving, compassionate to all the worlds. He carried this quality, Allah bestowed upon him this quality of Rahmah, which is a divine quality, one of Allah's qualities, which two of his holy names, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, are derived from. This loving compassion of God was embodied in the Messenger of God. And in all of this there are insights and there is wisdom that we can take away and be inspired with in any time. And certainly they can inspire us through the challenges that we face today, both with this coronavirus and the lockdown and all the difficulties that's going to create for people, and also through the political issues in America and elsewhere in the world, which are also causing a lot of grief for people. And on this note, I think we should start to read the Dhikr, or read some salawat upon the Messenger of Allah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now, before we start anything religiously, we should check our intentions. I think this week I do the Gamgol Sharif one. I haven't done that for a few weeks. نويت العبين، نويت الأزلة، نويت القهوة، نويت الاعتكاف، نويت السلوك، نويت الريادة لله تعالى في هذا جميع. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Before we go into the rest of the Khatm, we will read Astaghfirullah, and this is seeking the forgiveness of God. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. أستغفر العظيم الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم وأتوب عليه إنه هو التواب الرحيم من كل ذنب ومعصية ومن كل ما يخالف دين الإسلام من كل ما يخالف الشريعة من كل ما يخالف طريقة من كل ما يخالف معرفة من كل ما يخالف حقيقة من كل ما يخالف عزيمة يا الرحمن الراحمين يا الله اللهم يا مسبب الأسباب يا مفاتح الأبواب يا مقلب القلوب والأبصار يا دلائل المتخيرين يا غيث المستحيين يا حي يا قيوم يا ذو الجلال والإكرام وأفوض أمري الله إن الله بصير بالعباد. Rabbi Tasharifa. Direct your heart to the heart of your Sheikh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. صلوات الشريفة. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي قد أتيتني من الملك وعلمتني من توليه حديث فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت وليه في الدنيا والآخرة توفاني مسلما والإكرمي بالصالحين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. إلا الشرف نبي وعلي وصحبه الكرام وإلى واهي أنبياء ومرسلين وقدماء شرائم وإلى أئمة أبوا وإلى مشايخنا في ترقات نقشبندية تعالية كستاني آل خواجگان. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن الرحيم. نستعين صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. 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 اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم يا الله يا الرحمن يا الرحيم يا حي يا قيوم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salamun kolom bir Rabir Rahim. 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 Salamun kolom mir 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 Rabir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nur-e Muhammad salli Allah. 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 Noor Muhammad Salli Allah, 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 Noor Muhammad Salli Allah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahu Samad. Allahu Samad, 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 Allahu Samad. Allahu Samad, Allahu Samad, Allahu Samad, Allahu Samad, Allahu Samad, Allahu Samad, Allahu Samad. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. There is no God except the God. In Arabic, La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, 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 La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, 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 La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, 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 la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, 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 Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم إلا الله إلا الله only Allah إلا الله 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 illallahu illallah, 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 illallahu illallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahu, Allah is with you. Allahu, 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 Allahu. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, this is where we do the silent zikr in the Khatm Khwajagan. Now, how we do this is we focus on one's breathing. And keep our mouth closed. Our tongue, roof of our mouth, we focus. And we breathe in and we think Allah. And we breathe out and we think Hu. Allah, it means the God in Arabic. Hu means is. When you breathe in and think Allah, think of Allah, focus on Allah, feel a light coming down through you from Allah. But when you breathe out Hu, feel this light going up through you back to Allah. And repeat. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa salim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. سيد ربي والسلام على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين والإنكارين أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الأشرف الأمين سيدنا محمدين صلوات على أفضل الأمين سيدنا محمدين صلوات على أكمل الأمين سيدنا محمدين صلوات صلوات الله وملائكته وأنبيائه ورسوله وجميع خلقه على محمد وعلى آل محمد عليه وعليهم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. ورضي الله تبارك وتعالى عن سادتنا شافعي رسول الله أجمعين وعن تبينا بهم بإحسان وعن مرشدين المهديين وعن علماء المتقين وعن أولياء الصالحين وعن مشايخنا في تاريخ نقشبندية عالية قدس الله تعالى وهم زكية ونال الله تعالى مباركة ودى الله تعالى علينا من بركاتهم وفيداتهم دائما والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. O Allah, shower your blessings upon the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and all of the previous prophets and their noble families, and upon the Ahlul Bayt, the household of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, upon the Imams Ali, Hassan, Hussein, Zain al-Abidin, Jafar as-Sadiq, and all of the Ahlul Bayt, and all of the Sahaba Ikram, the Khilafah Rashidin, the scholars, the saints, and especially upon my sheikhs, Sufi Abdullah and Mulana Sheikh Nazim, Ya Allah, raise their stations in your divine presence, and bless their souls for all eternity. O Allah, shower your blessings on Sunan Gunan Jati, all the other Wali Songo, Sheikh Yusuf, and Kiai Adank Badruddin, and raise their stations in Janatul Fidus and grant them more blessings for all eternity. O Allah, shower your blessings upon my beloved father's soul, and grant him Jannatul Fidus and raise his station in Jannah, and bless his soul for all eternity. O Allah, shower your blessings upon my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law, and grant them to stay in good health and well-being, to be in improved health. Ya Allah, bless them with the best physical, mental and spiritual health. Grant them long life. Grant them success in every good thing which they do. Grant them to be in the best of well-being. Grant them your divine protection. Look after them, for they looked after us as small children. Grant them the best of this life and the best of the hereafter. O Allah, shower your blessings upon my brother and my sister, my brothers and sisters-in-law, and all of my nieces and nephews. Ya Allah, shower your blessings upon them. Grant them to be in good health and well-being for all of their lives, and grant them long lives. Grant them success in every endeavour which they set their mind or heart to, and that is good, and send them your guidance and inspiration. Ya Allah, grant them the best of this life and the best of the hereafter. O Allah, shower your blessings upon my beloved wife, Fiona and our children, Sophia, Athena and Elizabeth. And grant our family to be under your divine protection and blessing. Grant our family the resources to be able to look after our family and fulfill our responsibilities to our community and to our human family. Oh Allah, shower your blessings upon our family and send your guidance, compassion upon my children, and forgive us all for any mistakes that we have made up until this point, and forgive us for any future mistakes, and guide our hearts and our minds to do what is best and what is right. Ya Allah, forgive us for any imperfection in our duties, and inspire us to support us to be able to perform them better. Oh Allah, forgive us for in any mistakes in our interactions with other people, and inspire us to interact better with other people. Oh Allah, shower your blessings upon my family, and bless the work which I do, which is for your sake, and inspire and guide my mind, my heart, and my hands to perfect it, to do it better for your sake, and for the sake of your beloved Rasulullah. Oh Allah, shower your blessings upon my friends, especially those friends who've been with me through thick and thin, especially Sheikh Robin and Auntie Nisha and their family, especially Sheikh Amran and his wife and their family, especially Sheikh Hisham Kabani and his family, Sheikh Mohammed Adil and his family, Nasa and his family, Rafiq and his family, Jamil and his family, Sean and his family, Mohammed Amin Evans and his family, Sheikh Dawood and his family, Terence and his family, Sani and his family, Habil and his family, Nuning and her family, Pak Diki and his family, Pak Widwan and his family, Pak Agas and his family, Pak Amin and his family, Pak Itya and his family, Pak Benny and his family, Wifni and her family, Hassan and his family, Noor and her family, Denise and her family, Hannah and her family. Ya Allah, bless my neighbours, Todd and their family, Todd and Yvonne and their family. Bless Abdul Hamid and his family. Bless Nahid and her family. Bless Mr. Williams and his family. Grant Nahid and her husband Shifa, and grant Mr. Williams as well a swift healing. Bless Johnny and his family. Bless Suleiman and his family. Bless Naveed and his family. Bless Sid and his family. Bless all of my friends, however they are connected to me, whether in my personal circle of friends, whether through the Naqshbandi tariqat, whether through the Association of British Muslims, the University of Birmingham Chaplaincy, Nadal Ulama, all my many interfaith and interfaith networks and social media networks. However people are connected to me, Ya Allah, grant that this, through me, is a connection to my sheikhs, and through my sheikhs, a connection to the Prophet Muhammad through their sheikhs, and through the Prophet Muhammad a connection to the Divine Presence. O Allah, make this as a channel through which blessings may flow to everybody, everyone who knows me, and everyone who knows them. And whatever difficulties they are going through, grant them your support. Grant them your divine protection through these testing times. Grant them your forgiveness. Grant them your inspiration and guidance. Grant them your divine support. Grant our human family forgiveness for our many mistakes. Grant our human family to be inspired towards a more humane, peaceful, human rights-based, just future. One that's compassionate to all our brothers and sisters in humanity, and also to all the other beings with which we share this earth with, and towards the environment, and towards any other beings that we may come into contact with from beyond this earth. Allah, inspire us to be the best. Inspire us to be the best people we can be. Ya Allah, you are the turner of hearts. It's easy for you to turn the hearts of even the most wicked person. And most people are not there, but they are just heedless and forgetful. Ya Allah, ignite their hearts with love. Love of you, love of your beloved, love of your divine guidance, love of what is right, and to come away from what is harmful and destructive to themselves and to our human family, to the environment, to this earth. And to love the things which are good. Good for our human family, good for our societies, good for the environment, and good for the other beings with which we share this earth, and other people with whom we may share this universe. Ya Allah, inspire our hearts, and open for us a time that is more harmonious, more peaceful, more blessed, more spiritual. If it be your will. For the sake of your beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa sallim. Salli Rabbi wa sallim ala jami' anbiyahi wa mursalin wa alin kulin ajma'in wa alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Allahumma barik thawaba ma qara'nahu wa nura ma taranahu wa hadiyatan wa wasilatan min ayyi ruhina nabiyina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa illa anbiya wa illa awliya kasatan ya ruhi Naqshbandi, wa illa Sheikh Abdullah Fayaz al-Agastani, wa illa Zindapia, wa illa Sufi Abdullah, wa illa Maulana Sheikh Nazim, wa illa Maulana Sheikh Hisham, wa illa Qai Adang Badruddin, wa illa Sheikh Badshah, wa illa Sheikh Habibullah, wa illa Sheikh Dawood, wa illa Sheikh Muhammad, wa illa Sheikh Noor, wa illa Sayyidi Salatina wa Siddiqiyun al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Lillahil hamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Lillahil hamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Lillahil hamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Lillahil hamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Lillahil hamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Lillahil hamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Lillahil hamd. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabi ummi wa ala Ali wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabi ummi wa ala Ali wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabi ummi wa ala Ali wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabi ummi wa ala Ali wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabi ummi wa ala Ali wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabi ummi wa ala Ali wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabi ummi wa ala Ali wa sahbihi wa sallim. Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Look out for my Friday reflections tomorrow, and have enjoyed the rest of the evening or the day, wherever you are, whatever the time it is. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu.